My name is Clara, and if you're expecting some grand introduction filled with accolades or titles, I'm sorry to disappoint. I'm just a regular woman who thought she had her life figured out, until it all came crashing down in the most humiliating way possible. You know how they say hindsight is 20/20? Well, let me tell you right now, I can see every single moment that led up to this disaster as clearly as if it were yesterday. I've always been someone who prided myself on my work ethic. Growing up in a small town where opportunities felt scarce, I knew from an early age that hard work was the only thing standing between me and mediocrity. So when I landed a job at one of the top marketing firms in the city, I felt like I'd hit the jackpot. It wasn't just any firm, it was his firm. Ethan Caldwell, the golden boy of corporate America, whose name carried so much weight that people practically bowed when he walked into a room. He was smart, ambitious, and devastatingly good-looking, the kind of man who made heads turn without even trying. But beneath his polished exterior lay something darker, something toxic that none of us dared to acknowledge until it was too late. At first, working for Ethan seemed like a dream come true. He was demanding, sure, but I convinced myself that his high standards would push me to be better. I poured everything I had into my role, staying late nights, skipping lunches, and taking calls at ungodly hours just to make sure every campaign we launched was flawless. And it paid off, at least professionally speaking. Under my leadership, our team brought in record-breaking numbers quarter after quarter. We became the envy of other departments, and clients started requesting us by name. For a while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was indispensable. But here's the thing about arrogance. It doesn't just affect the person carrying it. It infects everyone around them. Ethan's ego grew with each success, and soon he stopped seeing us as colleagues and started treating us like pawns in his never-ending game of chess. Mistakes weren't tolerated. Excuses weren't accepted. If something went wrong, someone had to pay the price, and more often than not, that someone was me. Not because I failed, mind you, but because I was the one closest to him, the one he trusted to take the fall when things didn't go according to plan. Still, I stayed. Why wouldn't I? This was the career I'd worked so hard for, and walking away felt like admitting defeat. Besides, there was always this nagging hope inside me that things would change, that Ethan would realize what he had in me and start treating me with the respect I deserved. Spoiler alert, they didn't, and he didn't. The day everything fell apart started like any other. I arrived at the office before sunrise, clutching my usual coffee to go and mentally preparing for another long day ahead. The air buzzed with anticipation. We had a major client meeting scheduled for later that afternoon, one that could potentially secure a multi-million-dollar contract for the company. Naturally, Ethan was in rare form, barking orders left and right, micromanaging every detail to ensure nothing went awry. I should have known, then, that trouble was brewing. When Ethan gets nervous, he becomes unbearable, lashing out at anyone unfortunate enough to cross his path. By mid-morning, tensions were running high. Our creative director, Mia, burst into tears during a review session after Ethan tore apart her presentation, calling it amateurish and unworthy of the Caldwell name. Even Marcus, our usually unflappable CFO, looked visibly shaken when Ethan accused him of fudging the budget projections. As for me, I managed to keep my head down and avoid drawing attention to myself, at least until lunchtime. That's when it happened. Ethan summoned me to his office under the pretense of discussing last-minute changes to the pitch deck. I entered cautiously, sensing the storm clouds gathering behind his piercing blue eyes. Without preamble, he launched into a tirade about how sloppy our team's performance had been lately, citing examples that ranged from trivial oversights to outright fabrications. Before I could defend myself or point out that many of those mistakes were actually his own doing, he dropped the bombshell. "You're fired," he said, his voice cold and clipped. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "What?" I stammered, my heart pounding in my chest. "You heard me," he replied, leaning back in his chair with an expression of smug satisfaction. "Effective immediately. Pack your things and leave. Your services are no longer required." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Are you serious? Do you have any idea what's at stake today?" "The client meeting." "Don't worry about the meeting," he interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "We'll manage just fine without you. In fact, I think the team will perform better once you're gone." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. All those years of loyalty, sacrifice, and dedication, reduced to nothing in the span of a few cruel sentences. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to fight back against the injustice of it all. But instead, I found myself frozen, unable to move or speak as reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. And then, as if firing me in private wasn't humiliating enough, Ethan decided to make an example out of me. Just as I was gathering my belongings, he called an impromptu staff meeting in the conference room, right in front of the very clients we were supposed to impress later that day. With a smug grin plastered across his face, he announced my termination to the entire team, citing vague reasons about performance issues and not being a team player. The looks on my colleagues' faces said it all. Shock, pity, and worst of all, relief that it wasn't them. As I stood there, feeling smaller and more insignificant than I ever had in my life, something inside me snapped. A spark of defiance ignited deep within my chest, burning through the shame and humiliation threatening to consume me. Summoning every ounce of courage I possessed, I forced myself to meet Ethan's gaze head-on. "Well," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside me, "I wish you the best of luck with tomorrow's contract signing. I truly hope it goes well for you." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. For the first time, Ethan looked uncertain, thrown off balance by my unexpected composure. But before he could respond, I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving behind not just my job, but also the remnants of the person I used to be. Now, sitting alone in my apartment hours later, I replay the events of the day over and over in my mind. How did it come to this? What could I have done differently? The questions swirl endlessly, but one thing is certain. I refuse to let Ethan Caldwell break me. Whatever happens next, I'll rise above it, and maybe, just maybe, teach him a lesson he won't soon forget. The days following my abrupt dismissal were a blur of conflicting emotions. Anger, sadness, embarrassment, they all swirled together in an exhausting cycle that left me drained and disoriented. I avoided checking my phone, knowing full well it would be flooded with messages from colleagues who didn't know what to say, friends offering sympathy, and recruiters trying to capitalize on my sudden availability. None of it mattered. What consumed me most was the gnawing sense of betrayal, not just by Ethan, but by myself. How had I allowed someone else's ego to dictate so much of my life? Why hadn't I seen this coming? Still, as painful as it was, there was also a strange clarity in losing everything. For years, I'd been living for other people, pleasing clients, appeasing Ethan, striving for promotions I thought would validate my worth. But now, stripped of all those external markers of success, I was forced to confront who I really was and who I wanted to become. That realization came to me one evening while I sat on my apartment balcony, staring out at the city skyline. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was beautiful, yet bittersweet, a reminder that endings often pave the way for new beginnings. As I sipped a glass of wine and let the cool night air wash over me, I made a decision. This wasn't going to be the end of my story. It was going to be the start of something better, something mine. The next morning, I woke up with purpose. Gone was the heaviness that had weighed me down since Ethan's cruel theatrics. In its place was determination, a quiet but unshakable resolve to turn this setback into an opportunity. The first step was simple, reclaiming my power. And the best way to do that? By proving to myself, and maybe even to Ethan, that I didn't need his approval or his company to succeed. I started small. First, I updated my LinkedIn profile, not because I was actively looking for another job, but because I needed to remind myself of everything I'd accomplished. Scrolling through my list of achievements felt like rediscovering pieces of myself I'd forgotten. Campaigns I'd spearheaded, clients I'd won over, strategies I'd developed from scratch. Each bullet point was a testament to my skills, my creativity, my resilience. By the time I finished updating my profile, I felt a renewed sense of pride, not in where I'd worked, but in what I'd done. Next, I reached out to Mia. She'd always been kind to me, even when Ethan treated her poorly during those review sessions. Over coffee, we commiserated about the chaos of working under such toxic leadership. "You deserve so much better than that," she said earnestly, her eyes filled with genuine concern. Her words struck a chord deep within me. Maybe I did deserve better. Maybe we all did. But as much as I appreciated Mia's support, our conversation planted a seed of curiosity in my mind. If Ethan's behavior had affected me so profoundly, how many others had suffered silently under his reign? Was I the only one he'd humiliated? Or was I just the latest casualty in a long line of victims? Determined to find answers, I began reaching out to former employees of Caldwell Marketing, piecing together stories that painted a far darker picture than I'd imagined. One former colleague, Rachel, recounted how Ethan had sabotaged her presentation to a major client, taking credit for her ideas and blaming her when things went wrong. Another, James, described being publicly berated in front of the entire team after making a minor typo in a report, a mistake anyone could have made. The more I listened, the angrier I became, not just for myself, but for everyone Ethan had manipulated and mistreated along the way. It wasn't enough to simply walk away from Caldwell Marketing. No, if I truly wanted to reclaim my power, I needed to expose the truth. But how? Going public with accusations against someone as influential as Ethan carried risks, legal repercussions, professional backlash, personal attacks. Yet, the alternative, letting him continue unchecked, felt equally untenable. There had to be a way to hold him accountable without destroying myself in the process. As fate would have it, inspiration struck in the form of an unexpected email. It was from Daniel Harper, the CEO of Harper & Company, a rival marketing firm known for its innovative campaigns and employee-first culture. His message was brief but intriguing. "Clara, I've heard great things about your work and would love to discuss potential opportunities." At first glance, it seemed like a standard recruitment pitch, but something about the timing and the fact that he knew exactly when to reach out made me suspicious. Curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to meet him for lunch. Daniel was nothing like Ethan. Where Ethan exuded arrogance, Daniel radiated humility. He spoke passionately about his vision for the industry, emphasizing collaboration over competition and integrity over profit. Listening to him talk, I couldn't help but feel a pang of longing for a workplace where people were valued, not exploited. When the topic inevitably turned to Caldwell Marketing, Daniel didn't mince words. "Ethan's reputation precedes him," he admitted, swirling his coffee thoughtfully. "Plenty of talented individuals have left his company disillusioned and disheartened. Frankly, it's why I reached out to you. I believe someone with your experience and insight could bring real value to our team." His words warmed me, but they also sparked an idea that grew bolder with each passing second. What if joining Harper & Company wasn't just about finding a new job? What if it was about dismantling the empire Ethan had built on fear and manipulation? With Daniel's resources and connections, I might finally have the leverage I needed to take him down. Of course, executing such a plan wouldn't be easy. It required careful planning, strategic alliances, and nerves of steel. But as I shook hands with Daniel at the end of our meeting, I felt a flicker of hope, a glimmer of possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, karma could still be served. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my new role at Harper & Company with a level of dedication that surprised even me. Under Daniel's guidance, I quickly rose through the ranks, earning the trust and respect of my colleagues. Together, we launched campaigns that not only rivaled Caldwell Marketing's, but surpassed them in creativity and impact. Clients began flocking to us, drawn by our fresh approach and commitment to excellence. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I quietly gathered evidence of Ethan's misconduct. Emails documenting his abusive behavior, testimonies from former employees detailing his unethical practices, financial records hinting at questionable dealings. Piece by piece, I assembled a dossier that would make any corporate watchdog salivate. But exposing Ethan wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Justice for every person he'd belittled, undermined, or discarded. Justice for the countless hours we'd wasted tiptoeing around his fragile ego. And yes, justice for me, the woman who'd once believed she could change him, only to learn the hard way that some people are beyond redemption. Now, as I sit here writing this, I can't help but smile at the irony of it all. Ethan thought firing me would silence me, erase me. Instead, it awakened a fire within me, a fire fueled by indignation, ambition, and an unrelenting desire to right the wrongs he'd inflicted. Tomorrow, I'll deliver the final blow, the culmination of months of painstaking preparation. Will it work? I don't know. But one thing is certain, whether I win or lose, I'll face whatever comes next with my head held high. Because, unlike Ethan Caldwell, I'm not afraid of failure. I'm not afraid of starting over. And most importantly, I'm not afraid of standing up for what's right, even if it means burning bridges along the way. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. Armed with the dossier I'd meticulously compiled, I scheduled a meeting with Harper and Company's legal team and presented my findings. The room fell silent as I laid out the evidence, emails, testimonies, financial irregularities, all pointing to Ethan Caldwell's unethical practices and toxic leadership style. Daniel listened intently, his expression unreadable, but his jaw tightening with each revelation. When I finished speaking, there was a long pause before Daniel finally broke the silence. "Clara," he said, leaning forward in his chair, "you've done something extraordinary here. This isn't just about taking down a rival company. It's about exposing a culture of abuse that has no place in our industry." With Daniel's blessing, we decided to go public. We released a carefully crafted statement detailing Caldwell Marketing's misconduct, accompanied by anonymous testimonials from former employees. Within hours, the story exploded across social media and news outlets. Journalists dug deeper, uncovering even more skeletons in Ethan's closet. Clients began pulling their accounts, citing concerns over ethics and integrity. Investors panicked and stock prices plummeted. For days, I watched as the empire Ethan had built crumbled around him. It wasn't easy, not when friends warned me about potential backlash or when trolls online accused me of being bitter and vindictive. But through it all, I held on to one truth. I hadn't done this for revenge. I'd done it because no one should have to endure what so many of us had suffered under his leadership. Weeks later, I received an email from Mia. She'd left Caldwell Marketing shortly after the scandal broke, unable to stomach working for someone like Ethan any longer. "Thank you," she wrote simply, followed by a string of heart emojis. Her message brought tears to my eyes, not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me why I'd fought so hard in the first place. Meanwhile, Harper and Company thrived. Our client roster doubled within months, and morale among the team soared. Employees who had once feared retaliation now felt empowered to share ideas, knowing they'd be valued rather than dismissed. Under Daniel's leadership, we became more than just a marketing firm. We became a beacon of hope for an industry desperate for change. As for me, life took on a new rhythm. I bought a cozy apartment with a view of the city skyline, adopted a rescue dog named Luna, and started mentoring young professionals eager to learn the ropes without sacrificing their dignity. For the first time in years, I felt truly happy, not because of external achievements, but because I'd finally found balance. My work still mattered, but it no longer defined me. One evening, as I strolled through the park with Luna trailing happily at my side, I ran into James, the former colleague who'd been berated over a typo. He looked different somehow, lighter, freer. After exchanging pleasantries, he hesitated before saying, "I heard about what you did, about Caldwell Marketing. I just wanted to say thank you. You gave us all a voice." His words stayed with me long after we parted ways. They reminded me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up, not just for yourself, but for others. That night, as I sat on my balcony watching the stars twinkle above the city, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but for the first time, I believed I could handle whatever came my way. And then, almost as if the universe itself wanted to seal my happy ending, Daniel called me into his office the next morning. When I walked in, he handed me a framed certificate promoting me to Vice President of Strategy, a role I'd never dreamed possible just months earlier. "You've earned this," he said with a warm smile, "not just because of your talent, but because of your courage." Tears welled up in my eyes as I accepted the promotion. It wasn't just a title. It was proof that standing up for what's right doesn't come at the expense of success. It paves the way for it. Years later, when people ask me how I got to where I am today, I tell them the truth. I got here by refusing to stay silent, by choosing to fight back, not with anger, but with purpose, and by remembering that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the sweetest victories. Ethan Caldwell, he faded into obscurity, his name synonymous with hubris and failure. As for me, I became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance to rewrite your story. And so, as I sit here writing these final words, I realize something important. Happiness isn't about avoiding pain or hardship. It's about finding meaning in the struggle and emerging stronger on the other side. Because in the end, karma doesn't just happen. Sometimes you have to help it along.